The last hope. Humanity had reached its lowest point. The skies were filled with enemy warships, their dark silhouettes blotting out the sun. The cities that once thrived were now in ruins, burning under the relentless assault of the alien invaders. The alien fleet, led by the Sarnak Empire, had crushed Earth's defenses. Every attempt to fight back had failed. The humans had tried everything: missiles, bombers, even advanced warfare, but nothing had worked. The Sarnak's technology was too powerful, too advanced. The human race was on the verge of extinction, and the leaders of Earth were ready to surrender. In the United Nations headquarters, the leaders of Earth gathered in a grim, silent room. They knew what was coming. They had no choice but to bow to the alien invaders, to accept whatever terms the Sarnaks would offer. The world had fallen. The survivors were only waiting for the inevitable: Earth's surrender. Captain Jenna Blake sat at the table, staring out the window at the destruction outside. She had been through countless battles, but nothing like this. The aliens had overwhelmed Earth's best efforts with ease. The entire human race was on the brink of collapse, and the only thing left to do was to surrender and hope for mercy. But Jenna couldn't accept it. She couldn't give in without a fight. Not after everything they had lost. Not after seeing the destruction of her home, her family, and everything she had fought to protect. She was a soldier, and a soldier never surrendered. "Captain Blake, what are we going to do?" one of her officers asked, his voice shaking. He was young, barely old enough to be in the military, but the terror in his eyes said everything. He was scared. They all were. Jenna turned to face him. "We don't surrender," she said, her voice firm and steady. "We fight. We find a way. We can't just give up." "But how?" "We've tried everything. The aliens are too powerful. We can't win." "We can't win by fighting the way we've been fighting," Jenna said. "But maybe we don't need to win the way we think. Maybe the answer is something else." Her mind raced, trying to think of anything that could save them. She thought of all the history books she had read, the battles, the heroes, and the wars fought and won against impossible odds. There had to be a way. Suddenly, a thought struck her. It was crazy, reckless, and maybe even dangerous, but it was the only chance they had. What if we could use their own technology against them? Jenna said aloud. Her officers looked at each other, confused. "How do you mean?" one asked. Jenna leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she began to form a plan. "We know they've been using advanced alien technology to wipe us out. What if we could find a way to turn that technology on them? What if there's something they've missed? Some weakness we haven't found yet?" The room went silent. The officers exchanged glances, unsure of what Jenna was suggesting. The idea seemed impossible, but Jenna's determination was clear. If there was one thing she had learned in her years of service, it was that humans could never be counted out. They had faced impossible odds before and had come out victorious. Maybe they could do it again. "Captain, what do you have in mind?" one of the officers asked, his voice full of curiosity. Jenna stood up, her face set with determination. "We start by finding any weakness in their technology, any opening, any flaw. If we can uncover just one, we might be able to strike back." She turned to the others. "I need you to gather all the information we have. Any alien tech we've captured, any data we've collected. We'll analyze it. There's got to be something we can use." They all nodded, their faces now filled with a renewed sense of purpose. They had been defeated. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction. But in that moment, Jenna gave them something they hadn't had for weeks: hope. As the officers left the room, Jenna stood alone by the window. She gazed out at the war-ravaged Earth. Her heart ached for the people she had sworn to protect. The devastation was unimaginable, but she couldn't let that stop her. She wouldn't let Earth fall. Not now. Even if we have to go down fighting. She whispered to herself, "We'll go down on our terms." Jenna wasn't sure how, but she knew one thing. Humanity had to fight back. The aliens had underestimated them. They had made a mistake, and Jenna Blake was going to make them regret it. Back in the command center, her team worked tirelessly, sifting through the data, studying the alien technology. They were looking for any weakness, any flaw that they could exploit. Hours passed, then days, but they didn't give up. The more they studied, the more they realized something extraordinary. The aliens had overlooked something they had thought was insignificant. An ancient human artifact, buried beneath the ruins of an old military base, had the power to disrupt the aliens' technology. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "We found something," one of Jenna's officers said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Captain, we might have a way to fight back." Jenna's eyes sparkled with hope. "Tell me everything." The officer explained that the artifact, an old power core that had been part of a secret military project years ago, could interfere with the energy systems the aliens were using to control their ships and weapons. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense, but if they could harness it, it could disable the alien fleet long enough for humanity to launch a counteroffensive. Jenna smiled, a rare moment of triumph. "This is it. This is our chance." She knew it wasn't a guarantee. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. And Captain Jenna Blake wasn't about to give up on humanity now. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. As the days turned into weeks, the mood across Earth grew heavier. The sounds of war were ever present, and humanity's morale was near breaking. But in the dark corners of the planet, in the underground bunkers and hidden bases, hope began to rise. The discovery of the ancient power core, buried deep within a forgotten military base, was humanity's last, fragile chance to fight back. Captain Jenna Blake was not one to waste time. The moment they had uncovered the potential of the artifact, she had set the wheels in motion. Scientists, engineers, and military officers worked around the clock, analyzing the power core and attempting to figure out how they could harness its energy. The process was slow, delicate, and dangerous, but Jenna refused to let fear cloud her vision. They had to do this, for Earth, for every human who had been lost. Jenna sat in her command center, scanning over the holographic projections of the core and the alien ships. Her officers were deep in discussion, their voices filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. The alien fleet, still looming overhead, was waiting for Earth to surrender. The Sarnax believed their victory was assured. Little did they know that humanity had one final trick up its sleeve. "We have to move fast," Jenna said, her voice cutting through the chatter. "The longer we wait, the more time the Sarnax have to adapt to our movements." One of the officers, Lieutenant Marcus, looked up from his console, his face tense. "We've almost cracked the code, Captain, but there's something we don't understand. The power core's energy signature. It's unlike anything we've seen. It's almost like it's alive." Jenna frowned. "Alive? What do you mean?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before replying. "It's not just a power source. It seems to have its own consciousness. It reacts to our presence, like it's aware of us. We might be unlocking something far more dangerous than we anticipated." The room fell silent. The idea that the power core could be more than just a tool was unsettling. But Jenna knew that if they didn't push forward, humanity would be doomed. She trusted her team. They would figure it out. "Keep working on it," Jenna commanded, her voice calm but resolute. "We don't have a choice. This is humanity's last hope." As the team delved deeper into the core's mysteries, Jenna turned her attention to the Sarnak fleet, which was drawing ever closer. The massive alien ships hung like dark clouds in the sky, their presence a constant reminder of humanity's desperate situation. Jenna's mind raced, thinking of a way to use the core's energy to disrupt the Sarnak's control over their fleet. Meanwhile, word of the human resistance began to spread across the planet. The surviving fighters, soldiers, and civilians who had once felt hopeless began to rally. The idea of humanity fighting back, of challenging the invaders who had crushed their world, was a spark they desperately needed. People who had been hiding in fear now came out of the shadows, ready to fight for the future of their species. In a small underground base in what was once known as the United States, a group of resistance fighters, led by Commander Sarah Hayes, gathered. Sarah had lost everything in the war: her family, her home, and her city. But she was not broken. She had been one of the first to join the resistance, and now, with the discovery of the power core, her determination burned brighter than ever. "Captain Blake's plan is risky, but it's the only one we have," Sarah said to her team, her voice filled with conviction. "We can't wait for the enemy to make the first move. We have to be the ones to take action." Her team nodded in agreement. They had heard the rumors of the power core, and now they knew it was real. It was their weapon, their key to freedom. But they also understood the stakes. If they failed, humanity would be lost. If they succeeded, they would change the course of history. The resistance fighters began to prepare for their mission. They knew they would have to infiltrate the Sarnaq fleet's defensive perimeter, something that seemed impossible. But the core might just be the key to turning the tide in their favor. They would need to get close enough to the alien ships to disable their weapon systems, rendering them defenseless long enough for the humans to strike back. Back in the command center, Jenna's mind was focused solely on the task ahead. She stood in front of a massive holographic map of the galaxy, eyes tracing the path of the Sarnaq fleet as it moved toward Earth. There were only hours left before the invasion force would reach their last stronghold. Humanity had no time to waste. Jenna turned to her officers. "We need to launch an attack, and we need to do it now. Every minute we waste gives the Sarnaqs more time to prepare." She motioned to a large screen that displayed the status of Earth's military forces. "We have to divide our forces. Half will focus on the core's activation, while the other half launches a direct assault against the Sarnaq ships. We'll hit them from both sides." Her officers were skeptical, but they knew there was no other choice. The stakes couldn't be higher. Jenna took a deep breath. "We're going to hit them hard, and we're going to hit them fast. If this works, the Sarnaqs will be blind. They'll be vulnerable, and we will make them regret underestimating humanity." The team began making final preparations. Weapons were checked, ships fueled, and soldiers equipped. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her composure. This was it, the beginning of humanity's last stand. The final battle for Earth was about to begin. And despite the overwhelming odds, Jenna Blake and her team refused to back down. They would fight, they would survive, and they would change the course of history. The tension on Earth was unbearable as the Sarnaq fleet continued its steady approach, now just days away from making planetfall. The air was thick with anxiety, but it was also charged with a newfound sense of purpose. Humanity's rebellion had begun, and their defiance would shape the future of the galaxy. Captain Jenna Blake stood in her command center, staring at the massive screens that displayed real-time data of the enemy fleet's movements. The Sarnaqs were relentless, their ships as cold and impenetrable as their leaders. Their entire race had arrived to end humanity's resistance, but they had no idea what was coming. Jenna clenched her fists, staring at the blinking lights on her screen, signaling the approaching enemy vessels. The battle had begun, and the first strike would come from them. "Status report," Jenna said, her voice calm but filled with intensity. Lieutenant Marcus, who had been monitoring the power core, looked up from his console. "Captain, the core is ready. We've cracked most of the code, but there are still some unknowns. We can't fully predict its effects, but it should work as planned. We'll have to take the risk." Jenna nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. The core's potential was still a mystery, but humanity couldn't afford to waste time on further analysis. They had only one chance, one strike to cripple the Sarnaq fleet, one moment to turn the tide in humanity's favor. She had made the decision, and now there was no turning back. "We don't have a choice," Jenna replied, her voice determined. "We go forward with it. Prepare for launch, and get our fighters ready. We're going to hit them first." The final preparations began, and the countdown to launch echoed through the facility. Outside, the sky above Earth darkened as the alien ships loomed closer. On the ground, scattered military units and resistance fighters were preparing for the imminent battle. Across the world, every human who could hold a weapon had been mobilized, ready to fight for their home. Meanwhile, Commander Sarah Hayes and her team were gathering in the underground resistance base. The first wave of their fighters had been deployed to distract the Sarnax, drawing their attention away from the true threat, the power core. Sarah knew that if they failed to activate the core in time, the Sarnak fleet would lay waste of everything. Humanity's last hope rested on a single fragile plan. "The fighters are moving out," Sarah said as she stood beside her team, the holographic display showing the approaching alien ships. "We need to keep the Sarnax occupied long enough for Jenna's team to launch the core's activation. We can't afford to fail." Her team nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The world had changed in an instant. The resistance was no longer just hiding in the shadows. They were fighting back, clawing their way into the light. But even with all their courage, the odds were stacked against them. If the core failed, Earth would fall. In space, the Sarnak fleet positioned itself over Earth, the enormous ships casting shadows over the planet. Their weapons were powered up, and their commanders were eager to strike. The humans had resisted for far too long, and they knew it was only a matter of time before Earth was brought to its knees. But they hadn't accounted for humanity's ingenuity. The first wave of human fighters launched into space, cutting through the atmosphere and soaring toward the Sarnak ships. The fighters were small, agile, and packed with firepower, but they were outmatched. The Sarnak fleet was massive, and their advanced technology far outclassed Earth's. Still, the humans pressed on, knowing they had to delay the enemy's attack long enough for the core to be activated. As the first wave of fighters engaged the alien ships, the Sarnax responded with brutal efficiency. Laser beams lit up the sky as the two forces clashed. Explosions ripped through space as the human fighters dodged and weaved, firing back with all their might. The battle was chaotic, but the humans held their ground. They fought with everything they had, determined to buy time for the real plan to unfold. Back in the command center, Jenna's eyes were fixed on the countdown timer. They were moments away from launching the core's energy pulse. Every second felt like an eternity, and her heart raced with anticipation. It was their last shot. If this didn't work, humanity would be completely at the mercy of the Sarnax. "Activate the core," Jenna ordered. The room fell silent as the technicians began the sequence to launch the power. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy. A deep hum filled the room as the core's energy began to surge. Jenna watched the screen, her breath catching in her throat. This was it. "Charging complete," Marcus announced. "We're ready to fire." Jenna nodded, her hand steady despite the weight of the moment. "Do it. Fire the pulse." The command was given, and in an instant, a blinding beam of light shot up from the ground, streaking into the sky. It reached the Sarnak fleet in seconds, and the response was immediate. The alien ships, which had been locked in battle with Earth's fighters, suddenly staggered. Their weapon systems went offline. Communications were severed. The massive vessels, which had once seemed unstoppable, were now paralyzed, floating helplessly in space. The core's energy pulse had done the impossible. It had disabled the Sarnak fleet's systems. But humanity wasn't out of danger yet. The aliens were quick to adapt, and they wouldn't give up so easily. The first strike had been successful, but it was only the beginning of what promised to be a brutal and unforgiving war. Jenna's voice rang out over the comms. "All units, engage. We have them where we want them. This is our chance. Let's finish this." The human fighters, now fueled by the knowledge that the enemy was vulnerable, surged forward. They attacked with renewed fury, their numbers growing as more and more resistance fighters joined the fray. The battle for Earth had begun in earnest. And in the midst of it all, the Sarnax realized, too late, that they had underestimated humanity's resolve. What they thought would be an easy conquest had now become a desperate struggle for survival. The war had escalated, and humanity's spirit of resistance was burning brighter than ever. The thrill of humanity's first victory was short-lived. As the dust settled in space, the Sarnak fleet, though temporarily disabled, began to regroup. Their ships, once paralyzed by the energy pulse, slowly regained control. The Sarnak commanders, furious at the unforeseen setback, wasted no time in retaliating. They had underestimated humanity's tenacity, but now they would ensure that this mistake would not happen again. Captain Jenna Blake stood at the command center, watching the recalibrating alien fleet with a growing sense of urgency. The once proud, massive Sarnak ships had powered up again, their weapons humming with deadly intent. The pulse had given humanity a momentary edge, but it was clear that the battle was far from won. The Sarnaks would strike back with everything they had, and this time they would be prepared. "Report," Jenna snapped, her voice filled with tension. Lieutenant Marcus, standing next to the large tactical map, looked up, his face grim. "The Sarnak ships are reactivating their weapons. They've adapted to the core's energy pulse, Captain. They're not just responding, they're evolving. We're going to need more than that one shot to keep them down." Jenna's mind raced. The power core had been their trump card, and they had only used it once. But the Sarnaks were resourceful, and they wouldn't stay down for long. Humanity's remaining hope rested on their ability to keep the pressure on, to not let the Sarnaks regain their composure. But even with their fighters in the field, the balance of power was shifting. "We need to strike again, fast," Jenna ordered. "The resistance forces can't hold them off forever. If we don't keep up the momentum, the Sarnaks will overwhelm us." She turned to her officers, who were working furiously at their stations, analyzing the new developments. "What's our best chance?" One of the officers, a veteran named Sergeant Lorne, spoke up. "Captain, if we can somehow intercept their fleet's command ship, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. Without a central leader, they'll be scattered, and we'll have a chance to finish them off." Jenna considered the suggestion. It was a bold move. The Sarnak command ship was the most heavily guarded vessel in the fleet, surrounded by smaller ships acting as shields. It would be a near-suicide mission for anyone who tried to board it. But if they could take it down, it could break the Sarnak's chain of command and cause chaos among their ranks. Humanity's only chance was to strike decisively and hit them where it hurt. "Prepare a team to infiltrate the command ship," Jenna ordered. "We'll need our best soldiers for this, and make sure they're ready for a fight. They're not going to give up without a bloody struggle." Meanwhile, Commander Sarah Hayes and her team were deep underground, coordinating with resistance fighters from around the world. They had received word of the latest developments. The Sarnaks were already regrouping, and their counterattack would be far more vicious than anything humanity had seen before. Sarah stood in front of a holographic map, pointing at the Sarnak fleet's current position. "We've gained some ground, but the Sarnaks are coming for us with everything they have," she said, her voice resolute. "We can't let up. Our fighters need to keep them distracted while we prepare to hit them where it hurts." The resistance fighters, who had once felt like small cogs in a broken machine, now knew they were part of something much larger. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was a full-scale war. The battle for Earth had become a symbol for every oppressed species in the galaxy. If humanity could stand up to the Sarnak Empire, it would send a message that no one was beyond hope, that even the mightiest of invaders could be defeated. Sarah addressed her team, her eyes steely with resolve. "We're going after their command ship. We don't have time to waste. We can't afford to let the Sarnaks reorganize and take us down one by one." Her team nodded, understanding the importance of their mission. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future of humanity. Above Earth, the Sarnak fleet was now fully operational once again. The alien ships moved like a well-oiled machine, each vessel perfectly coordinated. But even as they prepared for their counteroffensive, something was amiss. A small human fleet of fighter jets, backed by resistance fighters, was approaching the command ship. They had a plan. A risky plan. But it was their only chance. Captain Jenna Blake's team had launched a daring assault to break through the Sarnak defenses. As their ships darted toward the alien fleet, the battle intensified. Laser beams shot across the sky as human ships evaded the oncoming fire, retaliating with laser strikes of their own. Every fighter was on edge. They could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the stakes bearing down on them. The first wave of human fighters engaged the Sarnak outer defenses, drawing attention away from the more vulnerable ships behind them. Jenna's own ship, the Talon, was at the head of the charge. She was prepared for anything. The battle was no longer just about survival. It was about taking the fight to the Sarnak heart. "We've got one shot at this," Jenna said to her team over the comms. "Hit their command ship with everything we've got. If we don't take them down, this war is lost." The ship's cannons roared to life, sending energy blasts toward the Sarnak fleet's core. The battle raged on, but every human in the fight felt a sense of unity and resolve. Earth's fight for freedom was not just about taking back their home. It was about ensuring that humanity would not be silenced, not by fear, not by alien invaders, and certainly not by the overwhelming might of an empire that thought it could conquer everything in its path. In the skies above Earth, the Sarnak fleet began to fight back with increasing ferocity. But the humans were determined. Their unity and ingenuity were their greatest strengths, and as they fought, they pushed back against the aliens in a way that no one had expected. The Sarnak Empire had underestimated humanity, and now they would feel the full force of their rebellion. The moment the human fighters engaged the Sarnak fleet in full force, the outcome of the battle seemed uncertain. Explosions filled the void of space as both sides threw everything they had into the conflict. The Talon led the charge, its weapons blazing as Captain Jenna Blake gripped the controls with white-knuckled determination. "Keep pushing forward, don't let up," Jenna barked over the comms, her voice sharp with urgency. The stakes were higher than ever, and humanity had only one shot to turn the tide of the war. Behind them, the battle raged on. Sarnak ships swarmed around them like angry hornets, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Every shot that missed was one less chance to survive, but every hit from the enemy was a reminder of how close they were to losing everything. Jenna's eyes flickered across the tactical map, pinpointing the Sarnak flagship, the Nexer, in the distance. It was heavily shielded, but there were gaps, small vulnerabilities that human fighters could exploit. If they could get close enough to the command ship, they could breach its defenses and strike at the heart of the Sarnak command. "Lieutenant Marcus," Jenna called out to her second-in-command, his voice always a steadying force behind her. "I need those coordinates. Where's the weakest point on the Nexer?" Marcus didn't hesitate. His hands danced across the console, pulling up the most recent data. "There, Captain. The lower starboard section. If we fire on those generators, we can disable the shields long enough for a boarding team to get through." Jenna nodded, her mind already calculating the risks. The lower starboard section was heavily guarded, and any miscalculation could result in the loss of the entire fleet. But there was no other option. If they didn't make this work, the Nexer would crush them all. "All right, let's give them everything we've got," Jenna ordered, and the Talon's weapons fired in rapid succession. Each pulse of energy struck the Sarnak ship with precision, causing explosions to ripple across the massive warship's shields. It wasn't enough to bring it down, but it was a start. Meanwhile, on the ground, Commander Sarah Hayes and her team had infiltrated the Sarnak base and planted explosives on the most critical parts of the enemy infrastructure. They had been moving cautiously through the alien base, avoiding detection and setting traps where they could. The mission was fraught with danger, but Sarah knew the stakes. "Is everything set?" Sarah asked, her voice low and steady as she crouched behind a cover, watching for enemy movement. "Almost there," one of her officers replied, his hand shaking slightly as he set the final explosives. "The Sarnak patrols are getting closer, though. We don't have much time." Sarah nodded. "Make it fast. We can't afford to be caught. Once those explosives go off, All hell is going to break loose. The team worked in silent synchronization, their movements sharp and practiced. Every second counted. Once they finished, they'd make their way to the extraction point, but they knew that the Sarnaq forces would be on high alert. Their window of escape was shrinking. As Sarah and her team finished their mission, the explosion rang out like a clap of thunder. The sound reverberated through the base, and the walls shook as the Sarnaq facility crumbled. Alarms blared, and the entire base went into lockdown, but the humans were already on the move, sprinting toward their escape route. "Get to the shuttle. Now," Sarah shouted, her heart pounding in her chest. As Sarah's team made their way out, they encountered enemy forces, Sarnaq soldiers storming through the halls, ready to stop them at any cost. Gunfire erupted, and the humans fought fiercely, using their superior tactics to take down the Sarnaq troops one by one. But there were too many of them. The odds were not in their favor. Back in space, Jenna's assault team had successfully cleared a path to the Nexer. The flagship loomed larger and larger in the view screen, and Jenna's determination intensified. They were close now, so close to hitting the core of the Sarnaq command structure. "Deploy the boarding teams," Jenna ordered, her voice fierce. "All units, prepare for the assault." Human boarding pods shot out from the Talon, racing toward the Nexer with blinding speed. The Sarnaq ships tried to intercept, but the human fighters were relentless, covering the boarding pods with a hail of fire. One by one, the pods hit their targets, and human forces flooded into the Nexer, prepared for the final push. The interior of the Sarnaq flagship was a maze of alien technology, corridors lined with jagged metal and harsh lighting. The human boarding teams had trained for this moment, their weapons ready and their minds focused. They moved swiftly, cutting through the Sarnaq defenses as they headed toward the command center. "Keep moving." Jenna's voice crackled through the comms, urging her team on. "We're almost there. Don't let anything stop you." As the human forces made their way deeper into the Nexer, they encountered heavy resistance. The Sarnaq soldiers fought fiercely to protect their command center, but the humans were prepared. Every soldier on the team knew that the success of this mission meant the difference between life and death, not just for them, but for the entire galaxy. Sarah's team was running out of time. Their shuttle was waiting, but it was surrounded by Sarnaq forces. The humans fought with every ounce of energy they had, pushing forward through the hail of enemy fire. They had to reach the extraction point, and they had to do it fast. With one final, desperate push, Sarah and her team broke through the Sarnaq lines. They reached the shuttle, wounded but alive, and boarded in haste. The shuttle doors slammed shut, and the ship shot into the sky, leaving the crumbling Sarnaq base behind. In the depths of space, the human boarding teams reached the heart of the Nexer. The command center was just ahead. The countdown to the final battle had begun. The Nexer loomed large in space, its imposing presence a stark reminder of the enemy's power. Inside, the human boarding teams were on the cusp of victory, but there was no time to celebrate. Every second brought them closer to the final confrontation with the Sarnaq leadership. As human soldiers fought their way deeper into the heart of the alien flagship, the weight of their mission pressed down on them. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Jenna Blake's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and filled with urgency. "We're almost there. All units, report status. Are we clear to breach the command center?" "Nearly, Captain," Marcus replied. "We've taken out most of their defenses. A few more pockets of resistance remain. We're pushing them back." The sound of blaster fire and the clatter of alien weapons in the background reminded Jenna that the fight was far from over. But they were getting closer. She had never felt so close to victory, and yet so far from it. In the bowels of the Nexer, Sarah Hayes and her team were in the midst of a fierce battle. Their shuttle had just escaped the destruction of the Sarnaq base, but they still had to get to the Nexer's surface to join the final push. The escape had been close, too close. They had been lucky, but luck wasn't enough to guarantee their survival. "Watch out," Sarah yelled. ducking as an explosion rocked the hallway. Her team had been pinned down by enemy fire, but they refused to give up. The Sarnaq forces had been preparing for this assault, and they were not about to let humans break through their last line of defense. The sound of enemy footsteps echoed in the hall, growing louder by the second. Sarah raised her weapon, a grim expression crossing her face. "Move out. Now." The team sprinted forward, making their way through the winding corridors toward the command center. With every step, they drew closer to their goal, and to the enemy waiting for them. They would have to face their biggest challenge yet. Back in space, the Talon hovered just outside the Nexer's hull, ready to provide cover for the boarding teams. Jenna's eyes never left the view screen as the countdown to the final assault ticked away. Every moment brought the galaxy closer to the edge, and every move Jenna made was calculated with the precision of someone who had seen the destruction the Sarnaq could bring. "All units, engage," Jenna ordered, her voice steady and filled with the weight of leadership. "We're going in." With that, the Talon's weapons roared to life, launching a series of powerful blasts that rattled the Nexer. The explosions caused the alien ship to lurch as if it were being struck by thunder, and the Sarnaq defenses finally began to crack. The human boarding pods launched once more, cutting through the vacuum of space with lightning speed. They hit the Nexer's hull, and the soldiers inside sprang into action, guns blazing. The fight inside the flagship was brutal. Every corridor was a battleground, every room a potential trap. The Sarnaq soldiers fought with a ferocity born of desperation, knowing that if they lost this battle, they would lose everything. But humanity's resolve was unyielding. With each Sarnaq soldier that fell, the human teams gained ground. The Sarnaq were strong, but the humans were smarter. They adapted quickly, using their knowledge of tactics and strategy to exploit the weaknesses in the Sarnaq's defense systems. As the human forces breached the command center, Sarah's team entered from the opposite side. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the heart of the Nexer, a massive room filled with high-tech alien equipment and the Sarnaq's leaders. At the far end of the room stood the Sarnaq High Command, including General Vorith, the mastermind behind the war. His eyes narrowed as he saw the humans, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "So, you've come to finish what you started," General Vorith sneered. "Do you think you can defeat us? We are the masters of this galaxy." Sarah stepped forward, her weapon aimed directly at the Sarnaq general. "We've already beaten you," she said, her voice cold and unwavering. "Your reign ends here." Behind her, the rest of the team readied their weapons, positioning themselves for the final confrontation. This was it, the moment they had fought for. The Sarnaq had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Vorith's smile faltered for just a moment before he snarled, "You are nothing. A fleeting threat. Your victory is meaningless." But Sarah wasn't listening. She nodded to her team, and they began their assault, engaging in a fierce firefight with the Sarnaq High Command. The battle was intense, but the human fighters were relentless. One by one, they disabled the alien weapons and took down the remaining officers, clearing a path to the heart of the Sarnaq leadership. Jenna watched the progress from the Talon. The ship's sensors picked up every movement, every battle cry. She could feel the tension in the air, knowing that the end of the war was near. "Report," she demanded, her heart racing as she awaited the news. "Captain, we've reached the command center," Marcus reported. "The Sarnaq High Command is being neutralized. It's over. We've won." For a moment, Jenna allowed herself to breathe, the relief washing over her. The war was finally over. The Sarnaq had been defeated, and humanity had emerged victorious against all odds. But as she glanced out at the stars, a deep sense of foreboding crept into her mind. This battle may be over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The Sarnaq had been a powerful enemy, but the humans had proven they could overcome even the greatest of odds. With the Talon now heading back to Earth, Jenna knew that the galaxy had just witnessed the birth of a new power, one that would never be overlooked again. The air was thick with smoke and the bitter scent of scorched metal as the final shots echoed across the Nexer's command center. The Sarnak High Command had been reduced to nothing more than a memory, and humanity had secured its place in the galaxy. But victory, as sweet as it was, came at a cost. The battle was over, but the war had changed everything. Jenna Blake stood at the bridge of the Talon, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars, once a symbol of fear and conquest for the Sarnak, now seemed to shimmer with a new kind of promise, one that was born from human determination, resilience, and sacrifice. For the first time, the galaxy was no longer under the shadow of the Sarnak Empire. Humanity had carved its name into the stars. "Captain, we've cleared the Nexer," Marcus reported, his voice still tinged with the exhaustion of battle. "The ship is ours. The Sarnak forces are scattered and retreating. It's over." Jenna nodded but said nothing. She didn't need to hear the confirmation. The events of the past few hours had etched themselves into her mind with crystal clarity. The battle had been fierce, but humanity had proven time and time again that they were capable of more than anyone had ever given them credit for. They had fought for their survival, for their freedom, and for the future of the galaxy. Set a course for Earth, Jenna finally ordered. "It's time to go home." As the Talon's engines roared to life and the ship began its journey back to Earth, Jenna's thoughts drifted to the people who had made this victory possible. Sarah Hayes, Marcus, and every soldier who had fought on the front lines. Each one had played a crucial role in ending the Sarnak's reign of terror. The sacrifices they had made, the lives lost, would never be forgotten. Sarah and her team were already aboard the Nexer, preparing to bring the ship into the human fleet's orbit. They had proven their worth in battle, and now they were going to help rebuild what had been broken. But there was something more they needed to do. "We need to send a message to the galaxy," Sarah said, her voice firm but weary as she spoke to her team. "We've won, but this victory means something more. It's a message to every species out there. The galaxy is no longer a place where the powerful can trample on the weak. Humanity will no longer be a footnote in the history books of the universe. We will make our own destiny." Her word hung in the air, a declaration of a new era. The humans had been kicked out of the Galactic Council, but now they had done what no one had thought possible. They had defied the odds and defeated a seemingly invincible enemy. Now, humanity wasn't just surviving. They were shaping the future. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the people rejoiced. News of the victory spread across the globe faster than the speed of light, igniting celebrations from the quietest villages to the bustling cities. But among the cheers and tears, there was a new sense of unity. The war had changed humanity. They had faced the impossible and come out victorious. But it was more than just the battle they had won. It was the change in the way they viewed themselves and their place in the universe. A new wave of hope spread across Earth. Nations that had once been at odds now looked to one another as allies. The war with the Sarnak had united them, but it had also sparked a new kind of ambition. No longer would humanity be afraid to venture into the stars. No longer would they allow themselves to be treated as lesser beings. The galaxy had seen the power of humanity, and it was only a matter of time before they would see it again. But even as humanity celebrated their hard-won freedom, Jenna Blake couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy still held its secrets, secrets that could threaten everything they had worked for. The Sarnak were gone, but other threats loomed in the distance, watching with interest as the humans began to chart their course in a galaxy that had once been hostile to them. The victory over the Sarnak was only the beginning. As the Talon and the Nexer made their way back to Earth, Jenna stood at the helm, a look of determination etched on her face. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she knew one thing for sure. Humanity would never be the same again. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and now humans had a seat at the table. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger than ever. The Sarnak had thought they could destroy humanity, but in the end, it was humanity that had destroyed them. And now, with their enemies scattered, Humanity was free to reshape the future of the galaxy. But as Jenna watched the stars stretch out before her, she knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The universe had no idea what it had just unleashed.